A boy thrown out by his cruel stepmother discovers a hidden fortune in the forest. But instead of choosing revenge, his unexpected decision changes everything in a way no one could imagine. The golden morning sun poured gently through the tall windows of the grand house, wrapping everything in a soft, warm glow. Laughter echoed through the halls, pure, light, and full of life. In the garden, little Obie ran freely, his tiny feet brushing against the green grass as his mother chased him playfully. Her laughter was like music, filling the air with love and comfort. "Catch me if you can," Obie giggled, looking back with bright, joyful eyes. His father stood nearby, watching them with a proud smile. In that moment, everything felt perfect, like a world untouched by pain. Inside the house, the dining table was always full, not just with food, but with warmth, care, and togetherness. Every night, they sat as a family, sharing stories, laughter, and love. Obie's mother would gently stroke his hair as he leaned against her. "No matter what happens," she would whisper softly, "this home will always be your safe place." And Obie believed her. But sometimes, life changes without warning. One quiet evening, the house felt different. The laughter was gone. The warm light had turned cold. Obie stood outside a room, his small hands trembling as he heard hushed voices and soft cries from inside. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he felt it. Something was wrong, very wrong. Hours later, his father stepped out, his eyes red and heavy with pain. He knelt down in front of Obie, trying to speak, but the words wouldn't come easily. "Obie," his voice broke. "Your mother, she's gone." "Gone? How could someone just be gone?" Obie stood still, his world suddenly silent. The laughter, the warmth, the love. Everything disappeared in that single moment. Tears slowly filled his eyes as he looked toward the empty room. She promised she would always be here. So why did
she leave? Days turned into weeks, but the house never felt the same again. The bright walls now felt cold, and the once joyful rooms were filled with silence. Obie would sit alone, holding on to memories that felt like they belonged to another life. His father tried his best. He worked harder, stayed busy, but the sadness never truly left his eyes. And then, one day, things began to change again. A new woman entered the house. She came with a polite smile and kind words, speaking gently to Obie and showing respect to his father. Slowly, she became a part of their lives. Soon after, she became his father's new wife. At first, everything seemed normal. But sometimes, not everything is as it appears. Obie watched her closely. There was something in her eyes, something he couldn't understand. A quiet coldness hidden behind her smile. He stood silently in the hallway one evening, watching her as she looked around the house. Not with love, but with something else. Something darker. And in that moment, a strange feeling settled deep inside his heart. Why do I feel like everything is about to change again? The house that once felt like heaven was slowly turning into something unfamiliar, something heavy. And Obie had no idea that this was just the beginning of a storm that would change his life forever. The mornings in the once happy house no longer began with laughter. Instead, they started with sharp voices and heavy footsteps echoing through the halls. "Obie, wake up. There's work to be done." The gentle warmth that once filled his days had been replaced with cold ardèche and endless demands. Before the sun could even rise fully, Obie was already on his feet, sweeping floors, carrying water, scrubbing dishes until his small hands turned red and sore. The new woman in the house, now his stepmother, stood watching with crossed arms, her eyes filled not with care, but with constant dissatisfaction. "Faster," she would snap. "Why are you always so slow?" Obie would nod quietly, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, mother." But no matter how fast he worked, it was never enough. In another room, laughter still existed, but not for him. His step-siblings, Jude and Amara, sat comfortably at the dining table, enjoying warm meals, fresh fruits, and sweet treats. Their clothes were clean, their faces bright with joy. Obie stood at the kitchen door, watching silently, his stomach aching with hunger. The smell of food filled the air, making his empty stomach twist even tighter. "Mother," he said softly one day, gathering courage. Can I please have something to eat? She turned to him slowly, her expression hard. Then she laughed, a cold, sharp sound that cut deeper than any words. Eat? You think you deserve food after working like this? Lazy boy, she said harshly. Go finish your chores. Obie lowered his head, stepping back quietly. Maybe, if I work harder, she will be kind to me one day. But that day never came. Hours turned into days, and days into weeks. The workload only increased. He cleaned every corner of the house, worked in the garden under the hot sun, carried heavy buckets of water, and washed piles of clothes that never seemed to end. At night, when everyone else rested, Obie would lie on the cold floor, his body aching, his heart even heavier. The house that once felt like a safe haven had turned into a place of fear. Was this really his home anymore? Sometimes, the kind housemaid would secretly hand him a small piece of bread or a sip of water when no one was watching. Those tiny moments of kindness felt like the only light in his dark world. But even that light was fragile. One evening, as Obie struggled to carry a heavy bucket into the kitchen, he stumbled slightly, spilling a little water onto the floor. Before he could even react, slap. The sound echoed loudly. His stepmother's hand had struck his face. You useless boy, she shouted. You can't even do a simple task properly. Tears filled Obie's eyes, but he said nothing. He simply bent down and cleaned the mess, his hands shaking. Not because of the pain, but because of the silence inside him. The silence where his happiness used to live. Day by day, Obie became weaker. His bright smile faded, replaced by tired eyes and quiet tears. He was no longer the joyful boy who ran freely in the garden. He had become invisible in his own home. And yet, deep inside, a small part of him still hoped. Hoped that things would change. Hoped that someone would see his pain. But hope, when left alone for too long, begins to fade. The change did not come loudly. It came quietly, like a shadow creeping into the light. At first, it was small things. Obie noticed his father sitting alone more often, staring into nothing as if lost in a place no one else could see. The strong, confident man who once filled the house with authority and warmth now seemed distant. Father. Obie called one evening, stepping closer. Are you okay? His father blinked slowly, as if waking from a deep dream. Obie, yes, I'm fine, he said, but his voice lacked its usual strength. Days passed, and the changes became harder to ignore. He began forgetting simple things. Important meetings were missed. Conversations were left unfinished. Sometimes, he would walk into a room and forget why he was there. Other times, he would sit silently, whispering to himself in confusion. Obie watched all of this with growing fear. This is not my father. Something is wrong. One morning, his father tried to stand but suddenly lost balance, gripping the table for support. His hands trembled, his face pale. Father. Obie rushed to him, holding his arm. You need to rest. But before Obie could help further, a voice interrupted sharply. Oh, please don't make a big deal out of it, his stepmother said, walking in with a faint, controlled smile. He's just tired. Her tone was calm. Too calm. Obie looked at her, confused. How could she be so unbothered? As the days went on, his father grew weaker. The once powerful man was now dependent, slow, and fragile. He could no longer manage the house, the business, or even protect his own son. And slowly, control shifted. The stepmother began making decisions. She handled the money, gave orders to the workers, and spoke as if everything now belonged to her. But behind closed doors, her true face revealed itself. One night, as Obie quietly passed by her room, he heard something that made his heart freeze. A soft laugh. Not a kind one, but cold, sharp, and filled with satisfaction. Yes, now everything is falling into place, she whispered to herself. Obie stood still, his breath caught in his chest. Was this all just a coincidence? Or something much darker? From that moment, the house no longer felt like a place of sadness alone, it felt dangerous. His father's condition kept getting worse. His eyes lost their clarity. His voice lost its strength. And with every passing day, Obie felt more helpless. He wanted to speak up to protect his father, but he was just a child, already struggling to survive under the same roof. One evening, Obie sat beside his father, gently holding his weak hand. "I'm here, father," he whispered softly. "I won't leave you." His father looked at him, his eyes filled with confusion, but somewhere deep inside, there was still love. Still recognition. But it was fading. And as that light slowly dimmed, the darkness in the house grew stronger. Because now, there was no one left to stop her. The evening air felt heavy, as if something terrible was about to happen. Obie stood quietly in the courtyard, his small hands clenched, his heart filled with emotions he could no longer hold inside. From the window, he could hear his stepmother laughing loudly, her voice sharp and careless, while his father lay weak and forgotten in another room. Something inside him finally broke.
As she stepped outside, her eyes immediately fell on him. "Why are you still standing here?" she snapped. "Don't you have work to do, you useless boy?" Obie took a deep breath, his voice trembling but firm. "Please, stop calling my father useless. He is sick. He needs care, not this." For a moment there was silence, then her face darkened. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she hissed, stepping closer. "You think you have a voice in this house?" Obie didn't step back this time. "He is my father," he said softly, "and this is my home too." That was the moment everything exploded. Her hand rose without warning. Slap! The force sent Obie stumbling back, his cheek burning with pain. But before he could recover, another strike followed, and another. "You ungrateful child!" she shouted, her voice filled with rage. "I gave you a place to live, and this is how you repay me?" Obie covered his head, trying to protect himself, but the blows didn't stop. His small body shook, not just from pain, but from heartbreak. Was this really the place he once called home? Finally, she stopped, breathing heavily, her eyes filled with anger and something even darker. "Get out," she said coldly, pointing toward the gate. "Get out of my house. I never want to see your face again." Obie froze. Those words echoed in his mind. Get out. Slowly, tears rolled down his cheeks, but he didn't argue. He didn't beg, because deep inside, he knew there was nothing left to fight for. Maybe I don't belong here anymore. With trembling hands, he picked up a small, worn-out bag. Inside, there was almost nothing, just a thin blanket and a few dried fruits. That was all he had. No food, no protection, no one. He turned one last time, looking at the house that once held all his happiest memories. But now, it felt like a stranger's place. Without another word, he walked away. The gate closed behind him with a cold final sound, and just like that, he was alone. The night grew darker as Obie walked with no direction. The road stretched endlessly ahead, and the familiar village slowly disappeared behind him. His feet ached, his body weak, but he kept moving. Where else could he go? Hours passed, and the world around him turned silent. The only sound was the rustling of leaves as he stepped into the forest. Tall trees surrounded him, their shadows dancing in the dim moonlight. Fear crept into his heart. But there was no turning back now. He found a small patch of ground and sat down, pulling the thin blanket around himself. His stomach growled in hunger, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. For the first time in his life, Obie had nothing. No home, no family, no safety, only darkness. He looked up at the sky, his eyes filled with silent tears. And in that quiet moment, one question echoed in his heart. What happens to a child when the world leaves him behind? The wind whispered through the trees as if carrying his pain into the night. But deep within that broken heart, a tiny spark still remained, a spark that refused to die. The morning sun rose gently over the forest, its soft light filtering through the tall trees. Obie slowly opened his eyes, his body sore from sleeping on the hard ground. For a moment he forgot where he was, but then reality returned. He was alone, no warm bed, no breakfast waiting, no one calling his name, just silence. His stomach growled painfully, reminding him that he hadn't eaten properly in days. But even in his weakness, something inside him pushed him to keep going. I need to survive, he whispered softly. Looking around, Obie decided he couldn't stay exposed like this. He needed a small shelter, a place to feel safe, even if just a little. Picking up a sharp stick from the ground, he began digging into the soil, trying to make space for a small structure. The earth was hard and his hands quickly became tired. But he didn't stop. Each movement was slow, but determined. Minutes turned into hours, and then, thunk. The stick hit something. Obie paused, his breath caught. "What is that?" he murmured, kneeling down. He pushed away the loose soil with his bare hands, his curiosity growing with every second. Beneath the dirt, something dark began to appear, a black plastic bag. It looked old, but tightly packed. Obie's heart started beating faster. Slowly, he pulled it out of the ground. It was heavier than he expected, very heavy. For a moment, he hesitated. Should he open it? What if it was something dangerous? But curiosity won. With trembling hands, he untied the knot and carefully opened the bag. And then he froze. Inside the bag were stacks and stacks of money. Fresh banknotes neatly bundled together, filling the entire bag. Obie's eyes widened in disbelief. "Money?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. He reached inside, touching the bundles as if to make sure they were real. They were. So much money. More than he had ever seen in his entire life. Is this a dream? He looked around quickly, his heart racing. The forest was silent. No one was there. No one had seen. A strange mix of excitement and fear filled his chest. This wasn't just money. This was a fortune. With this, he could eat, buy clothes, find a home, maybe even live a life he had lost. But as quickly as those thoughts came, another feeling followed. Confusion. Why was this here? Who did it belong to? And most importantly, what should he do now? For a moment, Obie just sat there, staring at the bag, his mind racing with possibilities. His life had changed in a single moment, from nothing to everything. But was it really that simple? He quickly tied the bag again, his hand still shaking. He knew he couldn't leave it there. Someone else might find it. Looking around carefully, he searched for a safer place. A little deeper in the forest, he found a large tree with thick, twisted roots. It felt hidden, protected. He began digging again, this time with urgency. Once the hole was deep enough, he placed the bag inside and covered it carefully with soil, leaves, and branches, making sure it was completely invisible. He stepped back, memorizing every detail of the place. No one could know. As he stood there, breathing heavily, a new feeling slowly grew inside him. Not fear, not sadness, but something else. Possibility. For the first time since he was thrown out, Obie felt like maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over yet. But one question still lingered in his heart. What would he do with this power? Because sometimes what we find doesn't just change our life, it tests who we truly are. Obie sat alone under the thick canopy of the forest, the hidden bag of money resting beside him. The wind rustled the leaves above, whispering secrets that only he seemed to hear. His hands rested on his knees, but his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Should he use this fortune to finally get revenge? To make his stepmother pay for all the pain she had caused? The thought burned in his chest like fire. He could imagine her shocked face, trembling as he returned wealth she had denied him. But then another image flashed before his eyes, his father, frail and sick, lying weakly in the grand house, unable to protect him. Obie's heart clenched. He needs me, even after everything. The forest was silent, but the weight of the choice pressed heavily on him. Anger, resentment, and longing for justice battled with compassion and love. Could he turn his back on his father just to settle old scores? Obie closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. Memories of happier times with his father surfaced, the laughter, the warmth, the sense of safety that had vanished so abruptly. How could he let those years of love be erased by bitterness? I can't let anger control me. I have to do what's right, he thought, his voice barely a whisper to himself. Rising to his feet, he clenched the bag tightly. Every step he took back toward the house was heavy with emotion. He imagined the stepmother's sneer, her cruel laughter echoing in his mind, but he pushed it aside. His focus was on something greater now. When he finally reached the edge of the property, he paused, staring at the mansion where his father lay weak and helpless. Could one act of kindness really outweigh years of pain? He didn't have time to second-guess. He would save his father. With determination fueling each movement, Obie carried the bag carefully, making sure no one noticed him. Every branch he stepped over seemed to remind him of the hardships he had endured, the endless nights of hunger and fear, but he didn't let it stop him. Not today. Finally, he approached his father's bedside, his heart pounding with both fear and hope. He gently laid out what he had found and whispered, "Father, this can save you. Let's fix everything that's broken." His father opened his eyes weakly, seeing the determination in his son's face. For a moment, the room seemed lighter, as if hope itself had returned. Obie realized that real strength didn't come from revenge or anger. It came from love, sacrifice, and making the choice to do what is right. In that quiet moment, he understood something powerful. The pain of the past doesn't have to define the future. He could choose kindness, even when the world had been cruel to him. Obie quietly guided his father through the shadowed streets, careful to avoid anyone who might recognize them. The bag of money felt heavier than ever, but it wasn't the weight of gold. It was the weight of responsibility, of hope, of a second chance. His father leaned on him weakly, every step a struggle, and Obie's heart ached with both fear and determination. Could one act of courage really undo years of neglect and cruelty? The thought lingered as he led his father into a small, safe home far from the reach of the stepmother. The walls were plain, but for the first time in weeks, Obie felt a flicker of relief. He could see it in his father's eyes, too, a glimmer of trust returning. I have to protect him no matter the cost, Obie thought, tightening his grip on his father's hand. He quickly arranged for the finest doctors, paying for treatments that could save his father's life. Each procedure, each medicine felt like a piece of the past being healed, as if the money he had found could finally restore more than just physical health. Days passed, and with each one, his father's strength returned slowly but surely. As he recovered, he began to speak in fragments, memories creeping back about the subtle manipulations and cruel actions that had poisoned their home. The stepmother's lies, her secret schemes, they all started to surface, one painful detail at a time. Obie listened carefully, his heart pounding with a mixture of shock and sorrow. How could someone so close betray them so completely? And yet the truth now gave him clarity. He realized that every act of cruelty had been part of a plan, but his father's survival and his own courage would rewrite the ending. He watched his father regain a spark of life and dignity. The man who had once been powerless under the stepmother's shadow now stood tall again, his eyes clear and strong. For Obie, the relief was immense, but he also felt the weight of justice waiting silently in the future. This truth must not be hidden any longer, Obie thought, a quiet resolve settling in his chest. Every act of kindness, every secret sacrifice had led to this moment where love and truth could triumph over deceit. By the time the stepmother's schemes began to unravel, Obie had already ensured his father's safety and well-being. The darkness that had once threatened to consume them was being replaced by light, carefully nurtured by patience, courage, and a heart unwilling to give up on family. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the final evidence was laid bare. Every document, every witness, and every hidden recording pointed directly to the stepmother's schemes. Obie watched silently, his heart racing, not with anger, but with the hope that justice, long delayed, would finally be served. Could someone so cruel truly be held accountable? The thought lingered as the judge's gavel struck, echoing through the room like a thunderclap of truth. The stepmother's face paled, her confident veneer cracking as the officers stepped forward to place her in custody. It's finally over, Obie thought, feeling a mixture of relief and quiet triumph. No longer would her lies and manipulation cast a shadow over their lives. Outside the courtroom, his father embraced him, tears streaming freely, the years of pain and worry melting away in that single powerful moment. Together they walked home, not just as father and son, but as survivors who had endured betrayal, hardship, and heartbreak. Their home, once filled with tension and fear, now held laughter and warmth. Obie used the money he had found to rebuild their lives, not with extravagance, but with security, love, and a future filled with hope. Even in victory, Obie felt a lesson settled deep within him. Revenge had never been the answer. It was kindness, courage, and patience that had restored justice and healed wounds. His father smiled, proud and strong, a man renewed not just in body, but in spirit. Neighbors and friends began to notice the change, the serenity that now radiated from their home. People whispered about Obie's bravery, but he never boasted. He simply lived the life he had fought so hard to protect. Every small act of love, every moment of resilience, had culminated in this perfect balance of justice and compassion. I will never let anger rule my heart again, Obie reflected, feeling the peace of knowing he had chosen the higher path. And as he looked at his father, safe and healthy, he realized that some victories are far sweeter when won with integrity rather than vengeance. The stepmother's arrest was a closure, a signal that darkness could not thrive when confronted by truth. And as Obie and his father rebuilt their lives, they carried a profound reminder. Even in the face of betrayal and cruelty, love and kindness are the most powerful forces of all. Moral, true justice shines brightest when tempered with compassion, proving that kindness will always outlast cruelty.